My name's Cheryl Allison, and I'm the director of a short film called Hiding in Daylight. And I'll tell you a little bit about just a quick summary of the film. Hiding in Daylight is set in the not-so-distant future, and a gay purge has taken place in America. And you have four best friends, a male couple and a female couple, who have had to enter into fake marriages with each other in order to hide. And so the film takes place as they've been doing this now for 3 years. And once a week, they get together in the evening to meet and reminisce about their formerly open gay lives and to see their true spouse. And what happens over the course of that evening is you start to see the stress from living like this start to unravel the relationships and put strain and stress on the friendships. And they have to make a very difficult decision whether they should continue meeting like this and risk their lives or not. And so it comes to a pretty dramatic ending, which I don't want to tell you about because I want the audience to be surprised. But that is what Hiding in Daylight is about. And I always say that it is a fiction film. It's considered a narrative fiction film, but it is a reality for many members of the LGBTQ community. Because what we say at the end of the film, we have a title card that homosexuality is currently illegal in 71 countries. And well, at the making of this film, it was illegal in 71 countries and punishable by death in 8. And so there are people in the LGBTQ community that are actually hiding in daylight in these countries. And it's interesting because just 2 days ago I read that the Sultan of Brunei, it's a small country in Southeast Asia, homosexuality is a crime there, but they just enacted a law that now they are allowing them to stone to death a member of the LGBTQ community. So now it's punishable by death. So it's a very real film for many, and that's the reason it was made, to raise awareness about this. The screenwriter is a dear friend of mine. His name is Gregory Allen, and he's from Dallas. And we met, back like in 1986 doing community theater here, and then we both ended up in New York and we're very good friends. And he's a wonderful writer. And he approached me last spring, about the middle of 2018, and said, I have written a play, and it's a one-act play, and I'd like for you to read it because I'm going to do a reading of it in Dallas, and maybe you'll play one of the parts. So he sent it to me, and I read it, and it was called Hiding in Daylight, and it was great. And I said, Greg, this could be a short film. This is great. You could do a film with this. And so he said, okay. And I said, can you take this 40-page one act and give me 15 pages? And he was like, okay. And he did. And the script was great. And so we decided to co-produce it together. He owns the film. He's the executive producer. But he was going to hire me to help get the film made. And then I was going to play one of the female roles in it. And my producing partner that I do a lot of my films with, her name is Karina Rush. She lives in New York and is also a very long-time dear friend of mine. And she came on board because she works with me at WOW Films as a producing partner as well. So we were in the middle of pre-production, getting this film off the ground. A lot of that goes into it, your casting and script revisions and, figuring out the location and all of that. And the more we talked about it, the three of us, I was saying, oh wow, it should be shot like this, or oh, we should use a steady cam so it's always constantly moving and make you feel a little claustrophobic. And I started saying things like that, and Greg all of a sudden called me one day with Karina on the phone and said, you're talking like a director. And I said, oh, well, and he goes, you should direct this. And I said, oh yeah, I'm not directing that. And he goes, no, you should, because I have never directed a narrative. And at the time, I was still filming Shadow the Silent, so I had never directed, as far as having a film come to fruition at that point as a director. And I resisted at first, and then I thought, well, am I resisting because I don't want to do it, or am I scared? And I realized I was scared, this sort of new path. And so I thought, no, I'm going to jump and do it. And so it's my directorial debut. And, we brought together an amazing cast, and we shot it in the fall of 2018. We shot it in September, and then over 2 days. And then very long days, and then we decided for me to edit it. As the director, and I was very obviously intimately involved with it, and so I brought it back to Dallas and spent about a month editing it, and then we went through post-production, and here it is. So we just started our film festival circuit, and I'm so proud of this film. It's already been in 9 festivals. Yeah, and so we're very, very proud of it. And it's going to be screening at the USA Film Festival as well as a finalist for Best Narrative Short, and it'll be on Friday, April 26th at 9 p.m. at the Angelica. And our screenwriter will come into town, and we're also going to have one of our lead actresses, Judy McLean, here. She plays the role of Val, and she's going to be in town as well. So that's pretty much the background of Hiding in Daylight.
What do you think it would take for other countries to be more open-minded for the LGBTQ community?
I think it's going to be really about conversation and raising awareness. There's just such fear about it, and misunderstanding, and then also it's a huge religious aspect. It's because that's the biggest resistance, is that they bring the Bible into it, and they they'll formulate text and verses from the Old Testament that they then use to say God condemns this. And so when you have some of these religions, they will persecute the gay community based on their religious beliefs. So I think when you have more people, especially the straight community, speaking up for the LGBTQ community, that helps. And then when you have people in powerful positions like the church and behind the pulpits, I attend Wilshire Baptist Church here in Dallas, and I grew up at that church as a young woman, and a young girl, and then I moved away. I lived in New York and Los Angeles, but when I returned to Dallas to live here, I didn't go to the church because they were not. At that time, they didn't really have a stance on the LGBTQ community. And I knew as an openly gay woman that I could not get married there. I know I was already married, but just the fact that I couldn't. And, since then, the senior pastor, Reverend George Mason, has led the church down a path of, enlightenment. And in 2016, they took a church vote. And it passed, over 65%, where, the LGBTQ community can serve, as a deacon, and they will marry, perform gay marriages. And it was a real big thing, especially for a Baptist church to do that. And it broke the church. They lost, I think he said 300 to 400 members. And that was hard. They lost a lot of the members that were longtime members and had a lot of money and could help support the church through a lot of tithing, and they lost that. And so they've been rebuilding and opening. But when I rejoined there then with my wife, we were told it's a better church now and a better home. And so I've come back home to that church. So I think when you have people in powerful positions like that, that's going to help. When you have in our schools, LGBT support groups, things like that, that's where the change will occur. Yeah.
You mentioned before we started recording that it was kind of influenced a little bit by Handmaid's Tale, right?
Yes. Gregory, the screenwriter, Gregory Allen, when he wrote it, he was fueled by a lot of some of the legislation that has taken place in our country and in other countries, and with the in our military, with the transgender fight for them to be able, transgender community to be able to serve in the military, and also at the state level. Laws are taking place at the state level every day that is, it's discrimination against our community. And Greg was fueled by that to write something as a comment on that. And I think by our current administration, and then he's a fan of The Handmaid's Tale, and so it kind of took on that a little bit of that dystopian. But we made it very current. Like in the film, one of the women, they make a reference to an elderly lesbian couple that were denied privileges to live in a retirement, like a senior living facility together, and that was in Missouri. And that's real. That came from a real headline that this elderly couple, they had an interview, they were accepted to live out their remaining days in this living facility, and when they found out that they were not just friends, that they were a couple, they were told they could not move in because based on religious rights, that facility did not believe in their their union and their partnership, and so they were denied. And so it made the news, and it made some national news. And so he wrote that into the script. He was keeping it very, very current, because I think a lot of people don't realize things like that are happening, at the local and state levels a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially in the South,
Yeah.
So, and Texas, Texas, work is not friendly, the government, to the LGBTQ community. So they're, we're always having to fight that a bit. So that was the inspiration for that. And I think people have been taking away that too, just really, raising awareness. And a lot of people, even people in the community, have said, I didn't realize it's illegal in 71 countries.
I know.
You don't think of
that.
that.
What?
You don't think of that in this day and age.
And what does that mean? Does that mean if you visit the country and you're holding hands or doing this and that?
Yeah,
like
you could,
can go
even
to
as a
jail?
visitor. And in fact, to give you an example, Tanzania has started to do a real crackdown on the homosexual community. So our government had issued a warning to any LGBTQ visitors, Americans that were there, that this was occurring, and that they needed to be aware of it. And then also they were saying, if you're living there as an American, and they were also just telling people who live in Tanzania, take down your digital profile. If you have anything on Facebook or social media that would link you to anything within the gay community, they are going to start a crackdown. So they were telling Americans, if you're there visiting, go to the embassy. Go there, leave the country. And that was just, my goodness, this was just a few months ago that we posted that on our Facebook, on our film's Facebook page. And it's funny because I've mentioned Wilshire, where I go to church. They're going to do a mission trip to Tanzania. And they were saying, anybody who wants to go, and things. And I thought, I couldn't go. If I wanted to go and help build a school or go help, the community there, I would be scared to. So there's also been a huge gay purge in Chechnya. That's been a really horrific thing, and there's been over 100 gay men killed and tortured. And Putin has not stopped that. He has not stepped in to say anything. And what's really sad is our government has not made a comment on it. So our current administration doesn't comment on things like that. So so that happens. So it's kind of like this where Shadow the Silence, my other film, feels like it's very important from the aspects of the Me Too movement and women and their voices being empowered and speaking out. This is the other big cause for me, obviously. And so we have two films that are just going out trying to raise awareness in two different aspects. So, it's a little heavy, going around. And editing both, I was editing this, and I kind of took Shadow of the Silence, sort of took a break while I was editing this film, and I was just like, wow, I got to do a comedy next. I got to do a comedy.
I was gonna ask you, was there something that happened that made you feel so empowered over the last couple of years to do these types of films?
I don't know. It might be, sort of the age I am in my life, where I am in my life, able to do certain things like this, passion projects. I think one thing that fueled it is back in 2014, I was cast as the lead in a feature film. And it was based on a true story about a woman who has 3 boys, and her middle boy starts suffering from mental illness at a very young age. And it was the story of how she tried to get her son help. And I got very close to the woman it was based on, and we had a big film premiere here and did press and all of that. And so I became an advocate through that film for mental health awareness, and I realized the power that film has to raise awareness for different marginalized groups and to address stigmas. And so as an actress, I became a voice for that film. And so then I started to think, I'm gonna start my own film company. And I love documentaries, I always have. And I thought, if I see a story that I think needs to be told, I'm gonna tell it. And so I bought the camera equipment, and I thought I can shoot it and I can edit it, and I'll do it. And so that's how I got into filmmaking, and then now directing, which has been, I love it. I love it more than acting. Yeah, I really do. Because you see it in a different aspect, everything, and editing. It's just so wonderful. Because the story's really told in the editing. Mm-hmm. Depending on how you edit, you can ruin a film or make it even more powerful, So I felt a huge responsibility with this short film and a huge responsibility with Shadow of the Silence, the documentary, to edit it in a powerful way, in a truthful way,
You hear people say a lot, well, if you want more content that's like this or on these subjects or with these marginalized groups, then, why don't those people make it? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, in a way, it's like you're embodying that by doing Shadow of the Silence. And this one, you're literally representing the 2 groups that you're marginalized in. So
yes.
It's really cool.
And it's been interesting. The LGBTQ community has embraced it, but we've gotten into 2 film festivals that are specifically for gay films, one in Philadelphia, one in Boston, but the other festivals have been just, your regular type of festivals that welcome all films, and that's been really exciting, because I don't want to just screen it for the LGBTQ community. That's not really the audience that needs to see it. So you want to screen it to these others. So we're very excited, and I can let you know that we got into the Newport Beach Film Festival, which is a very prestigious film festival in California. And we will be screening there the same weekend that we're screening at the USA Film Festival. So our screenwriter's going to come to our screening here, and then he's going to fly to California the next day. And then we also, you know what, I'll tell you, I don't know when this will be released, but if you hold on to this press, because, till maybe mid-April, because that's right before our premiere. Yeah. We haven't announced this yet, but we got into what is called the American Pavilion Emerging Filmmaker Showcase at the Cannes Film Festival.
Ooh, a Cannes.
And so this film is one of 25 films chosen out of 500 to screen there. So I'm going to Cannes. on May 17th I arrive. So that's been, I've tried to get 3 films into that thing because it's all short films, and never gotten it. And so we found out last week, and we're just like, and for it to be this film, and that because the feedback is people were like, I couldn't, it stayed with me, it upsets you. It's not a happy film, and it's done dramatically, but they were like, because people know that it's truthful. Mm-hmm. It's happening. So and at the end of the day, it's not a political issue and it's really not a religious issue, because at the end of the day, it's a human rights issue. You don't have to believe in what people say, a lifestyle. You don't have to say, condone. I don't care. But it's a human rights. People are being hurt. And that trumps, for lack of a better word, everything. Right? That trumps everything.
Yeah.
So,
And maybe that's why it sticks with people.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you're speaking to the human inside
Yeah.
of the story.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Everything else just fluff.
Yeah. Everything else is just fluff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see the documentary and then this movie, because of, it's dramatically different in
Right.
terms of how it's shot,
Right.
the color palette. Like, can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that
Yes, well,
process?
obviously, because with a narrative, it's going to be much more cinematic, right? So the documentary is shot with a documentary camera, video camera, right? So, and that's what I call a run and gun camera, where I can grab it and I can take it and go shoot the Women's March quickly, or take it. And it's a great high quality camera, but it's a documentary, and it's supposed to have a little bit of that news journalistic kind of feel, right? Because I want the audience for the documentary to feel like they're just sitting across the table from Reverend Wyvette and just talking to her. When they hear her talk, you don't want it cinematic and all this because it's about her story. It's her voice. That's what matters. It's all about the story and her voice. In narrative, yes, that story is the most important thing and how you tell it, but it's cinematic because it's a narrative. So this one was hard to shoot because you have 4 leads, that's it, and they're in one place. They're in a dining room and then a living room. That's it. And they're having, it's very dialogue heavy. It's because it came from a play. So when you're sitting around a round table, we could have just shot it where, okay, we're going to shoot it now and keep the camera on you while you say all your lines. Now we're going to put the camera on you and you're going to say all your lines, and then I can edit depending on the lines. But that can just get very, choppy and things. And I thought, I want the viewer to feel like they are a fly on the wall. Like they're a voyeur looking into this conversation. So I said, I need a Steadicam, which was expensive. So to tell you the truth, that's why I edited the film, because I said, take the money that we were going to pay for an editor. Get me the Steadicam and I'll edit it for free. Because that's how bad I wanted it to look perfect. So the camera goes around behind them, just circles around while they're having this conversation. There's no cuts, there's no edits. It's just this conversation, and then it goes the other way, and it just feels this voyeuristic kind of feeling until they hit this moment in the conversation where they start to argue, and then we go into that regular, close-ups or, 2 shots, that sort of thing. So we wanted to shoot it a real specific way with these long, sweeping shots to make you feel like you're in it, and then also it gave a claustrophobic kind of feel, and which represents how they felt living in this, hiding all the time, and what that must feel like to be cloaked in this, world of this fakeness that they're having to live in. So that's very different than a documentary, setting up a shot beautifully for an interview. Yes, you want your subject to look beautiful, and you want it to be a pretty shot because you're going to be looking at it a lot when somebody's talking and everything, and then you do B-roll and cutaway footage that helps you edit the film, because you have to cut to something if maybe you've cut the audio or you've done something, but the narrative is different that way. Music played a huge part in both films, though. And so one thing I'm proud about the documentary is that the music underneath it has really given it sort of a cinematic feel as well, I think. So,
are you wanting to make this in a full-length film?
The screenwriter has just written the first draft of the feature, because it is a play. So there's a lot more that goes into these characters, and he's written now where we can see their life before.
Okay.
The purge happened, which will be great. And so we'll be in the process of reading that and doing the revisions, and then hopefully, if this continues to be successful in the film festivals, that's sometimes how you can raise money to then make the feature. So, maybe we'll be sitting here in a couple of years talking about that, and hopefully I will have been able to direct it. So we'll see. But it would make a great feature.
Okay, I think we can wrap
else?
up. Is there anything else that you want to say about it?
Well, you know what? Can I give you? I should give you the websites.
Yes.
Or do you have those yet of both
She
films?
sent us
Are
links
they-
of
So
it.
you've got
Yeah.
links.
The links, yeah.
Okay, great. Because I want to make sure you have the Shadow the Silence website and then this one and the Facebooks and things like that, because that's great to help the film.
Are you gonna want to use the same cast for the feature?
You know what? I would love to, because they were exceptional. They were fantastic. So I would love to do that. So, and it had a real family feel, because we were crying at the end. Like, did you all see the film?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, you
yet.
saw it. So the end scene. We shot that last, because I said we can't shoot that. You shoot narratives out of order, right? And so you don't shoot in sequence. And so at first they were, because of scheduling, they were like, we should shoot the ending on the first day. I was like, we're not shooting that ending. We're not doing it until it's going to be the last one. I don't care, because it's so emotional. And I really asked my actors to go to a really
That's because you came from
dark place.
theater.
Yeah.
So you like
And
it,
I was like,
more than-
and we did. We shot it out of order, but I said it was so emotional that I thought that, they had a really intense day the day before, and they got to know each other, as a cast. They didn't know each other, but I thought, this is heavy, what I'm going to ask them to do. And so we were all shaking, and it was, it was really dramatic. And then we wrapped, and boy, I just started to cry, because it was intense.
So since this is happening in other countries now, are you hoping that people take the story and then use it as an awareness builder to drive other grassroots movements? Is that the
Yes.
ultimate aim?
Absolutely. And it's all, especially, and our screenwriter, that's why he wrote that, to raise awareness, is because complacency is what gets people there, right? It's the complacency, because when it doesn't affect you personally, it's easy to go, I have no problem with the LGBTQ community. I love it. I have gay friends. My cousin's gay. But then you don't think about how your vote matters, how you vote. So if you say, I'm supportive of the gay community and I love them, then you got to walk the walk, because your vote, you can be voting for somebody who is actively going to try to enact laws against the community, or giving to an organization or something like that. And that's what's really hard. And I think it's the complacency and that can be really, really scary. And they kind of address this in the film. There's one part where they go, how did we get here?
Yeah.
How did this happen? There were people fighting for us, and it's scary, because when you have a government that is gaslighting people, which we have right now, and I'm going on record to say it, but when we have that, you can be gaslighted. You can all of a sudden that sort of seems normal, and the kind of the fear and the divisiveness and the hate to fear them, and they are different, and they're doing this, and it's for, it can be against women, it can be against the African American community, it can be against the gay community, it can be against the Native American community, it can be against any marginalized group that has had to fight for their rights all their life, and that's what happens. So I think we're just trying to raise that type of awareness, to have people speak out about it, and to realize that this is going on, to bring a light to this. Because people say, well, it won't happen in America. Well,
Yeah.
we've been there. Like one person said, if you change the date of this film to like 1943, it would be reality.
I mean, but that's my grandparents' story. Like
Yeah.
my mom's mom, they're from northern Louisiana. And her grandmother is Native American and white, and her dad is Irish and black, but he doesn't have the dark skin. He has really fair skin,
Yeah.
red hair, green eyes. And they found that they were married, and so they literally lived They hid it by living on opposite sides of the farm. So he had a white family who he lived with. She lived with the black family on one side of the farm, and they lived on either opposite sides of this farm until they decided to all move to Dallas in the early 50s. And then they moved and they lived near Fair Park. But that's my family story, and that's because people couldn't look at them and tell what they were. But they had kids who looked like me.
Right.
And so that's how they figured it out. And so, you know, it's the story of, so I can see how you can get there.
Yeah.
You know, and people living in this little pocket of secrecy because, and then they have their insular families protecting them and their neighbors, and everybody's trying to fend for themselves until the regime changes. And I'm calling it a regime, that's the wrong word for it, but the regime changed in in Winsboro, and they started separating those families. And so people started leaving, so there was a massive exodus. And so you can see it on our tree. We moved from Louisiana to Texas. And there's 12 and 14, and they all moved near Fair Park, and they lived in these little houses, and they lived together, went to school together, but they were seeking some place where they were safe.
Exactly.
Just to be who they were. For things that they couldn't even control. You couldn't control what you looked like. But
Exactly.
So, or who you love.
Or who you love. And
so,
you are exactly right, because when people seem shocked that the elderly lesbian couple weren't allowed to live out their life in this senior living facility, they think, well, that's just unheard of. That doesn't happen these days. Yes, it does. Our film, Hiding in Daylight, premiered. Its world premiere was at the Oxford Film Festival in Mississippi. And we had a great premiere there. It's a wonderful film festival. And a woman came after the Q&A, you know, 'cause all of the filmmakers went up, we answered questions. Afterwards, a woman came up to me, and she was crying. And she was, you know, she might have been in her late 50s. And she said, I'm gay, and I live in Tupelo, Mississippi. And she said, your film means so much to me because we have to have this out there because Mississippi has all these laws against our community. And Mississippi allows for the discrimination that if they don't have to serve you, they don't have to bake the cake, they can ask you to leave. So she was saying, if I went into, with her partner, if she went into a diner and held her hand, they could legally say, I'm sorry, I can't serve you based on my religious right. And they passed it and said that's legal. And so, you know, that's no different than what's happened to every other marginalized group that's had to fight for those equal rights. So, you know, it is absolutely happens. And I just think, there's such a complacency about it that people think, oh, well, you got the right to marry, you're good. No.
Or that the story is
Or
that
racism doesn't exist. Racism doesn't exist,
done.
right? That's done.
We're past that.
You know, right. So there's no white privilege. Bullshit. So people, you know, that's why that I'm doing films like this, because if it changes one person's mind, okay. But, you know, but I do believe in grassroots effort, and I believe in that, the energy that causes in bringing these people together that all have this same passion, you know, whether it's the documentary or this film, that are just trying to fight the good fight, you know? Somebody's got to, right? Yeah. Because I've had friends tell me, why did you move back to Texas? Ugh, why are you there? Because my wife and I moved back here before gay marriage was legal nationally. So it was legal in New York, it was legal in California. We were married legally in New York. So we'd go to New York, we'd get off the plane and be like, oh my God, we have rights. If you died, I'd get your Social Security. We moved back to Dallas. Then we come back to Dallas where we're living. If she died, I wouldn't have gotten her Social Security. I wouldn't have gotten and we've been together 23 years. Wow. So, see, that's the reality that people don't realize. And so I had friends going, why are you there? I would do anything but live in Texas, because there's that perception. And I said, New York doesn't need me. West Hollywood in California doesn't need me. Key West in Florida doesn't need me. The South needs me. The South needs us. We have to have that. We got it, you know? And so we got to just keep fighting. And I thought, you know, so that's, now I'm just getting off on a big bandwagon. but that's, you know, that's really the reality of that, so.
Do you feel open and free in Dallas, though?
Completely. And I will say this. I have not experienced 1 ounce of discrimination here.
Wow.
And I tell you, sometimes in LA, if people are a little snarky, of all things.
Really?
And and New York was great. I don't really have any thing about that. I don't think anything ever happened. But here, no, been massively friendly. And just my parents, they live up at Robeson Ranch in Denton, and all of their friends are like, oh, they just love Natalie and I. And I'm asked to go sing at the women's luncheon. I mean, it's really been amazing.
That's so funny.
You know, if anything, I had more push a little bit about the documentary. It was the woman thing, like, oh yeah, another woman speaking up. Oh yeah, it was really more about that. You know, I've experienced more of the that kind of thing, a little good old boy kind of talk. You know, that's interesting, but not the gay thing. But it's been more of the, you know, why are you making a film about, you know, women and all, you're all going to be whining or
But
something.
that was
you know?
but that was a generational thing, right? Was that the Robeson Ranch
Mm-mm.
area? No, that was
just somebody here.
in
Yeah,
general.
yeah, just somebody like around my age that they don't get that, you know. So it's interesting.
That's amazing.
Because the reason I asked is because I grew up in Dallas like all my life. You know, I traveled though.
Yeah.
But like here in like the suburban areas, I really don't see like that many couples holding hands and kissing out and this and that. But then when I go to LA or something, it's like all over the place. That's why I asked
and
if you felt-
maybe they feel, I don't know, maybe some people feel more. I think there are people that are more, you know, in the closet here. I think there are a lot of people that I know that haven't, you know, come out, or they don't talk about it. Maybe their fear of not being accepted or something. You know, so I don't know about like the public displays of affection. I think maybe I think you're right. You know, in Chelsea or the Greenwich Village in New York, you know, people are a little more in your face. You know, here from my, you know, and every experience is different, right? And I never felt different, and I never felt like, you know, I'm not a big public displays of affection person anyway, and I never felt like I had to carry it on my shoulder, like, hey, I'm gay, so, you know, deal with it. I always it was just so part of me that I didn't feel like if you ask me, who are you, Cheryl, I wouldn't say, well, I'm a gay woman. Because if I ask, you know, Kelly, like, who are you? She wouldn't go, well, I'm straight.
Right.
So I don't feel like that's never been my identity, you know. I'm an actress, I'm a daughter, I'm, you know, passionate about, I'm so many things like that. I don't feel like sexuality is, you know, makes me up who I am. It feels natural to me. So I don't feel like I have to, but I will fight for rights, you know, and for the human rights aspect of it, you know, absolutely.
I'm glad, you know, you hear a lot of people, well, some people I think even in the South complain about an agenda in terms of like entertainment. I don't want to be preached at, I don't want to be, you know, given such a direct message, but...
They won't watch the Oscars because of all the speeches or the political speeches, but you know what I say? That's what art is for. Because Shakespeare, all of them, they were all writing plays that were reflecting their current government. They were writing things that were, you know, reflecting the queen and the king that were in power. Even music, whether it was Mozart, whatever, a lot of the operas, they were reflecting the politics and the culture of the time. And art, paintings did the same thing. So absolutely, if anybody says you have an agenda, well, of course. You know, there's absolutely room for the romantic comedies and the things, you know, the big action adventure movies. Great, there's all space for that. But then there is the time when you have something that really makes people stop and think, and are these films that raise awareness about things. I remember when I saw Philadelphia with Tom Hanks that dealt with AIDS, and no one was talking about AIDS. That was hugely important. But then even if you go see Wonder Woman, how many little girls were wanting to be Wonder Woman, and they realized they could, you know, they were as strong as a boy. They could be as powerful. Look at her. You know, that was important. So that's what art's for, is for bringing up different opinions, your point of views on things.